And I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Share. There we go. Right. Right, welcome everybody. We're going to look at wireless vulnerabilities. And you have myself, Bryony, and we have Nicole as well. And also along this, as ever, we are supported by Elizabeth and Andrew, and their smiling faces are down the bottom. We're looking at wireless networks, and Nicole and I were just having a chat about this, and wireless isn't overly highly trustworthy network in the first place, but it has its use. So it's cheap, and we always like to talk about money and computing, and it's really easy to maintain. It's quite simple to set up a wireless network. It's quite simple to add people to and take them away from a wireless network as well. It's great in places where maybe you can't have cables running because you've got listed buildings or buildings that are huge as well. You can have a nice little setup of a wireless network, but it's easy to compromise if you don't have those proper security measures in place, or if you haven't actually configured your network properly in the first place. Any high security things that we can use for wireless can be really expensive, but there are things we can do that don't cost a lot of money, and some of it's pretty common sense. As I said, installation's easy and fast, pretty simple to do. Plug something in, click some buttons, and usually away you go. Turn it on and off again if you get stuck. It's great for providing connectivity in areas that we can't really put wiring in or cabling in. As I said, any listed buildings, for example, you can't start drilling holes in walls or chucking things through the ceiling. Wireless gives us that flexibility. And it's fantastic for public areas. You have all connected to a public Wi-Fi somewhere. But we have limitations with the security. We can't set up as many security measures to protect it. You have issues with your bandwidth. The more devices you add, the harder it is to be able to share that in the first place, and you all get equal access. You probably deal with that at home when everybody switches on all their devices at the same time and all of a sudden your internet starts getting a little bit rubbish. We might have to look at improving hardware. So you might need some new network interface cards, you might need some new access points, and we all know that technology moves quite fast, so we might have to do that anyway as the new things come out. And you can also get interference from electronic equipment. Microwaves, funnily enough, can cause problems, but so can walls. I know they're not electronic. We have different vulnerabilities. So wireless network vulnerabilities are weaknesses or gaps in that wireless network that can be exploited by hackers or unauthorized users. We talked about cyber attacks a few weeks ago, and we're talking about malicious hackers in this sense, because we do have ethical hackers. They are essentially flaws in the design, implementation, or configuration of that network that compromise security and make it susceptible to cyber attacks. And that could be something that has happened during manufacture or the software configuration, or it could be something that's happened in the configuration of the network when you have created it or a company has created it. The different types of attacks. So we can have rogue access points, which are access points pretending to be an access point that's useful, and it's not really, and it's diverting traffic elsewhere towards malicious people. We can have weak encryption methods, so it's not encrypted good enough or at the standard it should be, which makes it easy to decrypt the information. So sticking with default or weak passwords, and the username being admin on the device and the password being admin or spacebar is quite common. It means that anybody can get into the devices or using weak passwords. If you've got anything that's been misconfigured, any unauthorized devices as well, and sniffing and spoofing, being able to pretend to be something else, and also looking at the network activity and seeing what's happening. You can look at the contents of the packets, and if you don't have great encryption, you'll then be able to get access to passwords that you shouldn't have access to in the first place. It just touched on this. So a rogue access point is an access point that's being configured and people connect to that thinking it's legal, thinking it's meant to be there. It's installed on a trusted network without authorization, and an insider or outsider attack can install rogue access points on your network for malicious intention. So they're out there to gather information without your intentional permission, I suppose is the right word. And they are pretending to be a legal or an authorized access point, and you're connecting to that and then checking your bank. And that means somebody may be able to get your bank details. Click. So we have different types of encryption. So WP or WEP, if you want to call it that, we're full of acronyms in computing, is one of the first standards for encrypting wireless networks. It can be very easily cracked. I can't remember the time frame it takes to do that. I don't know if Nicole does, but it's seconds now, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, it's really, really quick. Off the top of my head, I'm not too sure how many seconds.
Yeah, I used to know all of these things and I had it, what one was the longer one. And then when they realised WEP was a bit rubbish, we got WPA, which was a little bit better. It was kind of the intermediary between WEP and WPA2. So they realised they needed something that was better than WEP, but they hadn't quite got to the levels of what WPA2 is. And it has got stronger encryption authentication, but still easily hacked or cracked, if you want a better word. WPA2 is an upgrade. Uses two things called AES and CCMP for encryption. It's a lot harder to crack. And then the next one, a WPA Enterprise, and it's an updated version. So we go from top to bottom. Top, really easy to get access to. Bottom, a lot harder. Not a lot harder than WEP is.
WPA3 has also been released, and again, that is an advancement as well, so a wee bit harder to crack with more security features included.
Yeah, good to know. I've lost my mouse. Go. And last thing before I pass you over to Nicole, we're looking at weak encryption. So your wireless routers will use encryption to be able to protect your Wi-Fi network, and that secures your network with a password and keeps out intruders and prevents attackers from eavesdropping on your online activity. By default now, when you set up a wireless network, it will ask you to set up a password, but sometimes if you have a look at the Wi-Fi in your area, you might be able to see some networks set up without a password at all, and well, really you shouldn't be connecting them, but we all know that you can because they don't have a password there. So any router that uses that WEP encryption method, it's not very secure. It's outdated, it's weak, it's still password protected, but you're still vulnerable to attacks because that password is easily cracked. So the better encryption method, so WPA2 for example, means you've got less chance of somebody gaining access to your network. But that also then is determined by the password that you use as well. So we talked about that at the beginning. You need to make sure you've got a complex enough password so that people can't just sit there and have a bash at it and see if they can guess it in the first place. And I hand you over
Okay,
to
so I'm going
Nicole.
to look at a few other types of wireless vulnerabilities and wireless attacks as such. So session hijacking, and really what it allows the hacker to hijack that legitimate connection time. And really what they're doing is sitting in between yourself, your host device, and your Wi-Fi router. And they can then use that to really identify some information and use the traffic to gain personal private information that is transferring between the host device and the router itself. Denial of service attacks, and I know we have discussed this in more of a generic term a few weeks ago. Really, it's shutting down a computer or the network, making it unreachable to users. With the Wi-Fi version of it, it may be preventing access from a laptop device to that wireless access point, and those attackers or hackers, they can do that through flooding that network with packets, and really it's sending that huge traffic request and basically crashing that server or gaining access to that access point. Man in the middle type of attacks, and really a man in the middle uses tools an evil twin access point to intercept sessions between your SSL and your SSH tunnels. And what they're doing is sitting in between. And this may be for two purposes. They may do this to just sniff the information and see what traffic is being sent back and forth. Or another thing they can do is actually change that information that's being sent between the host and the destination devices. So again, they may manipulate that traffic and change it slightly, so the person sending that information actually wouldn't be aware that that information has been manipulated on transit. And then jamming, really the intention of jamming network is to jam a network, preventing devices from communicating and again disrupting essential services. And it is a type of denial of service type of attack. And it really generally overloads a network with strong signals and disrupts the usual operation. All right, so we have discussed a number of different types of attacks that are out there, but we do also need to know how can we mitigate against those attacks and what countermeasures can be put in place. So the first thing is, and many people probably don't do this, is actually changing your default SSID, and that is actually the name of your internet access or your broadband, and changing that name after your wireless configuration. Then setting your router access password and enabling the firewall protection. Again, many people just leave the default password, so it is important to change that because those default SSIDs and access points can be found online. Disabling your SSID broadcast. All right, and really what that means is disabling it for whenever you have a device and you go to search the internet and it appears within the Wi-Fi networks. You may wish to disable that. Also, prevent remote access. All right, so remote access to the router login and wireless administration panel. And then enable your MAC address filtering. All right, remember what your MAC address is, your physical address of your device. So for example, every device you have will have a unique MAC address, and the beginning of that address will actually have specific to the vendor or the brand as such. So for example, if we talk about an Apple device, it would have a specific starting point for their MAC address, and then that end part would be unique to your device. So you do need it. The thing that can be done is filtering the MAC addresses that can access the router or the access point. And ensuring you enable your encryption on your access point or change the passphrase often. So as Bryony spoke about, the different encryption mechanisms that are out there. So we have WEP, WPA, 1, 2, and 3. So if you have the opportunity, do use the stronger encryption mechanisms. Because remember, you don't want your data being sent in plain text either, so it is important to have something put in place. And as I've just sort of mentioned, choose your WPA instead of your WEP, and implement WPA 2 Enterprise within organizations where possible. Disable the network when not required. Okay, so if you're not at home, if you're away on a holiday, you may wish to turn off your network. Place your wireless access points in a secured location, and keep your drivers and all wireless equipment updated. Okay, so that is ensuring that they are protected against vulnerabilities that are known. And make sure to use a centralized server for authentication as well within organizations. And then another type of wireless network is Bluetooth, and it is short wireless communication technology. It is on a personal area network rather than really a local area network, so it is used for short or to share data over short distances. And for example, you may use it for connecting the likes of your headphones to your phone, a smartwatch, so forth. And with that, it can also be exploited. So I do think as a personal level, it is something you should be aware of. And there is a number of different vulnerabilities out there, and that can be compromised when the Bluetooth device is enabled. And two of them that we are going to look at is blue snarfing and blue jacking. Blue snarfing really is the security vulnerability of a Bluetooth connection or exploited to access the sensitive data on the target device. So that is actually gaining that information. So it's maybe viewing the image of the pictures that you have in your phone, your contacts, so forth. Whereas blue jacking, it's actually a Bluetooth device used to hijack another device and transmit unsolicited messages such as spam. Okay, so they're attacking it and actually sending things to it rather than gaining information from it. All right, so again, countermeasures around Bluetooth, you do need to ensure that you do only connect to known devices. Don't be connecting to any random requests that you have gained. Make sure that your Bluetooth is turned off when not in use. And again, another thing is the discoverability mode. If you don't require to connect to a new device, make sure your discoverability is turned off as well. All right, so that is everything around our wireless vulnerabilities that I have. Bryony, have you anything to add? You're on mute. Still can't hear you. I don't know what's going on. All right, so that's then everything for today. Have a lovely day, everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.